The wind over the plains carried a hollow song that winter, a tune made of emptiness and snow. The cabin stood alone on the ridge, its timbers groaning with age, smoke curling thinly from a crooked chimney. Inside, J.C. Holloway sat by the fire, the flames painting shadows on his weathered face. He was 30, though sorrow had carved him into something older. For years he had lived without speaking, sealing himself in silence the way a man seals away a wound too raw to touch. Folks in town said he had gone half mad, that grief had swallowed his voice. But J.C. knew it was not madness. It was shame, and shame can be heavier than any saddle. The snow outside thickened, whispering against the window panes. J.C. rocked in his chair, hand resting on the butt of a revolver he rarely used anymore. Then came the knock, sharp, hurried, almost lost beneath the wind. He froze. No one came this far into the hills, not in weather like this. The knock came again, weaker, pleading. His chest tightened with unease. He rose, boots dragging across the floor, and unlatched the door. There she was. A young woman stood in the swirl of snow, her hair tangled with frost, her lips trembling. She could not have been more than 20. Her dress was torn from travel, her moccasins soaked, her eyes dark and defiant even through exhaustion. She looked at him as if he were the last soul left alive in the world. "Marry me," she said, the words breaking from her mouth like fragile glass. For a moment J.C. thought he had misheard. But she stood firm, her voice rough but unwavering. "Please, marry me." The wind pushed at her back, urging her inside, but J.C. held the door as if it weighed 100 pounds. He had not heard his own name spoken in years, and here she was demanding his hand. He searched her eyes for madness, but found only desperation. Slowly, reluctantly, he stepped aside. She entered, clutching her shawl close, shoulders quaking. He shut the door, sealing them both inside with the fire's glow. For a long time they did not speak. J.C. ladled stew into a tin bowl and set it near her. She ate quickly as though afraid it might vanish. After, she sat by the flames, her hair dripping snowmelt onto the floor. Finally she spoke. "My name is Kiona. I had nowhere else to go." Her voice was quiet, yet steady, like the current of a hidden stream. J.C. gave no reply, only shifted his weight and stared into the fire. She did not press him. Instead, she whispered into the silence, "If you send me away, they'll come for me. And if they come, I will not survive." J.C. felt the words like a blade pressed to his chest. He wanted to ask who they were, what danger stalked her, but silence still shackled his tongue. Shame burned him. This woman begged for shelter and he could not even give her words. She seemed to sense the battle inside him. "I refused him," she said after a pause. "Elias Crow. The man they said must be my husband. He is cruel and I would sooner die in the snow than live under his hand. So I ran. And the only way he cannot claim me is if I belong to another. That is why I came to you." Her eyes flickered to his, steady and unflinching. "I chose you." The name Elias Crow was one J.C. knew well. A man feared in every saloon, whispered about in every campfire tale. To defy him was to invite ruin. J.C.'s gut twisted. He should have told her to leave, to find another road, another savior. But she sat there, fragile yet unbroken, and something in her gaze held him fast. He turned away, ashamed of his cowardice. His silence felt heavier than ever. The storm raged for days. In that time, J.C. and Kiona moved around each other in fragile truce. She mended a torn blanket with nimble fingers. He chopped wood until his hands blistered. They shared meals in quiet, the fire their only witness. Though no vows were spoken, something subtle grew between them, an unspoken bond built of small gestures. When he left a cup of coffee by her hand, she met his eyes with a gratitude that warmed him more than the fire. When she brushed snow from his shoulders after he came in from the cold, he felt a stirring he thought long buried. No declarations passed between them, but intimacy does not always need words. By the third day, hoofbeats thundered faintly across the plains. J.C. heard them before she did. His body stiffened, hand instinctively reaching for the rifle he had not touched in years. Kiona's face paled as she listened. "They found me." The words fell heavy between them. She did not cry, did not beg again. She only straightened her shoulders and looked at him, her chin high. "If you cannot stand with me, I will face them alone." Something inside J.C. cracked. He had hidden in silence for years, believing it kept him safe. But now safety felt like cowardice. He rose, took the rifle from the wall and stepped out into the snow. The riders came into view, their dark figures against the white. At their head was Elias Crow, broad-shouldered, his sneer sharp as a knife. He reined in before the cabin, his eyes narrowing at J.C. That woman belongs to me, Elias called, his voice carrying like thunder. Hand her over and no harm will come to you. JC felt the old weight press on him, the urge to retreat back into silence. But when he turned, he saw Kiona standing in the doorway, her eyes locked on his. Something fierce rose in him then, a strength born not of rage but of love unspoken. His voice, hoarse from disuse, broke free. No, just one word, but it rang like a bell across the snow. The riders shifted uneasily, taken aback by the ghost cowboy's voice. JC's throat burned, but he spoke again, each word slow and deliberate. She is not yours. She will never be yours. She stays here. With me. For a heartbeat, silence fell. Snow drifted between them, fragile and bright. Elias's face darkened, his hand twitching near his pistol. But JC did not flinch. He stood firm, eyes steady, rifle cradled but not raised. His stillness was its own weapon, a quiet defiance more powerful than any bullet. The other riders shifted, murmuring. Elias cursed, spat into the snow, and with a harsh tug of his reins, turned his horse. One by one the riders followed, their shadows shrinking into the white horizon. The storm swallowed them whole. When JC turned back, Kiona's eyes glistened with something he could not name, relief, wonder, and perhaps the fragile beginning of trust. He lowered the rifle, breath shaking from the release of fear. She stepped toward him, her hand brushing against his. It was the smallest of touches, yet it steadied him more than any victory. Together they returned inside, the fire waiting, the silence no longer a cage but a companion. That night, JC spoke more than he had in years. He told her of the wound that had silenced him, a woman he once loved, lost to violence he could not prevent. He had believed his words cursed, that speaking love invited ruin. So he had buried his voice in shame. Kiona listened without judgment, her hand never leaving his. When he faltered, she whispered, "Silence cannot shield us from pain, but it can steal the chance to heal." Her words cut deep, yet carried the gentleness of truth. He realized then that silence had not protected him. It had only kept him alone. They sat close by the fire, their shadows touching on the wall. There was no ceremony, no preacher, no ring. But in the way she leaned against him, in the way he rested his hand over hers, something sacred passed between them. A vow not made with words but with presence. A promise that though the world might judge, though storms might come again, they would face it together. His silence was broken not by noise but by connection. By dawn the storm had passed. The plain stretched wide and white, the sky pale with promise. JC stepped outside, the cold biting his skin, yet for the first time in years he felt alive. Kiona joined him, her face lifted toward the light. Snowflakes clung to her lashes, melting into drops that shimmered like stars. He looked at her, and in that gaze he saw not a fugitive, not a burden, but the reason he had found his voice again. She had knocked on his door seeking survival, but what she had given him was rebirth. Years later, old men would tell the story by firelight, how the ghost cowboy found his voice when an Apache woman asked him for marriage in the middle of a storm. Some would say it was madness, others would call it fate. But those who knew the weight of silence, who had ever lived unseen, would understand. Sometimes the world sends us the knock we do not expect, and all that is asked of us is to open the door. So if you have ever hidden your heart, if you have buried your voice out of fear or shame, remember JC and Kiona. Remember that silence is not peace, only pause. And sometimes, the knock that comes in the storm is the very miracle you have been waiting for.